In the months and weeks leading up to the launch of the Nintendo Switch, it was hard to wonder what the future might hold, or rather, might not hold, for Nintendo's 3DS and its family of aging handhelds. Would the Switch unofficially herald the end of the 3DS's life, as it did the Wii U's? Or would the 3DS, as Nintendo promised, continue to exist alongside the shiny new Switch for some time? As it turns out, proof of life for the dual-screen handheld would appear in the form of Fire Emblem Echoes, Shadows of Valentia, a remake, or a reimagining if you will, of the Famicom's Fire Emblem Gaiden, originally released in 1992 as the second game in the long-running Fire Emblem franchise. As a title meant to elevate the 3DS above any perceived insignificance in the wake of the Switch's launch, it's an interesting choice. After all, the original Fire Emblem Gaiden is generally regarded as the series' black sheep, not unlike the adventure of Link standing among Zelda fans. Nintendo could certainly have chosen a safer game to see the 3DS through its post-Switch doldrums at least. Safe or not though, with Fire Emblem Echoes Shadows of Valentia now just a month out from release in the US and Europe, Nintendo invited us to go hands-on with the game earlier this week. At just under an hour, it was an incredibly brief session, but I still walked away with a pretty clear idea of the overall direction fans can expect from this new, or is that old, Fire Emblem title when it launches next month. If there's one key point I want to get across in this preview, it's this. Nintendo is not streamlining or otherwise homogenizing Shadows of Valentia to bring it more in line with the series' more traditional titles as of late. Despite the many fresh coats of paint applied to bring the game's presentation in line with what you would expect from a 3DS title in 2017, Shadows of Valentia still very much feels like its own beast in that it comes off as a somewhat experimental, genre-blending take on Fire Emblem. It's familiar and different all at once. Shadows of Valentia will never make you question the fact that you're playing a Fire Emblem game, but at the same time, even a casual observer would have an easy time distinguishing it from, say, Fire Emblem the Sacred Stones or Fire Emblem Fates once they've seen enough of what Shadows of Valentia has to offer. This is because for all of Shadows of Valentia's familiar top-down grid-based battles, elegantly nuanced battle animations, and expressive full-screen character portraits, you've got entire gameplay sequences that turn the basic concept of what a Fire Emblem game can or should be on its ear. And I love that, at least so far. This is most obviously seen in the game's dungeons, which are explored as full 3D constructs in the vein of a third-person action RPG. In these sequences, you have full control over your character as you explore, find treasure, and engage enemies. Or not. It's your choice. You'll find plenty of enemies and other nasties roaming around in the field, and coming into contact with one immediately initiates a familiar grid-based encounter, with the usual Fire Emblem battle perspective and gameplay coming to the forefront. Transitioning into and out of these battles is fast and seamless too, just like the battles themselves per usual Fire Emblem tradition, so getting into a fight doesn't make you feel like you're being impeded or dragged down, and in a nice twist, you have direct control over how these battles start. Engaging an enemy by attacking them in the field will give you a starting advantage in the ensuing encounter. But what if you just don't feel like fighting, or your party is hurting from previous battles? Well, you can avoid battles entirely by giving enemies a wide berth in the field, but should one notice you, they'll give chase until you either escape the area or they force an encounter, so you'll need to stay on your toes. The way you can see, avoid, and affect enemy encounters in dungeons like this is reminiscent of more traditional turn-based JRPGs like Chrono Trigger, Earthbound, and Tokyo Mirage Sessions' Sharp FE, and it's neat to see Fire Emblem daring to blend subgenres like this in Shadows of Valentia. And there are even other brief sequences that play out much like a point-and-click adventure game in the vein of the Ace Attorney series, with you taking on a first-person perspective as you interact with characters and investigate the settings in front of you by making simple menu selections. I don't want to oversell this as being a huge part of Shadows of Valentia. These sequences amounted to a brief sliver of my overall time with the game, but it was striking to see just how closely Shadows of Valentia is keeping to its unusual Fire Emblem Gaiden roots even in this new incarnation. Shadows of Valentia deviates from core entries in the series in other important ways as well, chief among these being an altogether reduced gameplay focus on unit relationships and offspring. While you can still position certain characters next to one another in battle to trigger enjoyable relationship-building cutscenes, they're more like the support conversations of old. The emphasis is on learning more about the characters themselves and gaining stat bonuses when the two are near one another. This means you can sit back and watch character relationships evolve and play out without having to worry about which units produce the best or most powerful children in an army-building sense. This will no doubt prove to be an incredibly divisive deviation from the newer Fire Emblem norm, but I found it to be a nice change of pace from a game like Fire Emblem Fates, where you're more likely to pair characters up based on the effectiveness of their child in battle than actually wanting to see them together. Another high-level gameplay change from the Fire Emblem mainstream is the weapon triangle, or more precisely, the lack of it. That's right, there's no weapon triangle governing Shadows of Valentia's battles. Instead, more emphasis is placed on unit positioning, especially as it relates to the differing types of terrain on a battlefield and how that terrain can affect a unit's actions. For example, placing a unit on a forest tile will make them harder to hit for as long as they remain there. While you'd think that might make battles more simplistic overall, for me the inverse was true. I actually found that the weapon triangle's absence made the turn-by-turn proceedings a little more complex, as it's significantly less obvious at a glance which unit matchups are in your favor and which are not. Despite this, however, Shadows of Valentia still takes the admirable approach of allowing different entry points for fans of varying skill levels and time commitments, with normal and hard difficulty levels offered alongside optional permadeath. And if you still need an extra edge in battle, you can scan in some Fire Emblem Amiibo to call upon spectral versions of beloved characters who cannot be directly controlled, but nonetheless aid you in battle as allies. Meanwhile, the Shadows of Valentia exclusive Alm and Celica amiibo will summon phantoms based on your own Alm and Celica's stats, as well as unlock exclusive dungeons useful for farming experience, money, and items. My hands-on time with Shadows of Valentia was so brief that I can't really comment on the story, but one thing I can say for sure is that the narrative is backed up by an absolutely top-notch presentation. While the overall aesthetic is still unmistakably anime in its leanings, it's not the pure anime style we've seen in games like Awakening and Fates, instead opting for a slightly darker, more stylized approach. The full-screen character art looks fantastic, and the battle animations are every bit as elegant and nuanced as fans have come to expect from the series, maybe even more so. Meanwhile, the few pieces of the soundtrack I got to hear were fantastic and instilled confidence that Shadows of Valentia will be a serious treat for the ears. And that extends to the English voice acting too, by the way. Impressively, and for the first time ever in a Fire Emblem game, almost every line of dialogue is voiced, and the delivery was consistently strong and engaging in the scenes I got to see.
Okay, he's clearly a big deal. But then why is the finest knight in all the realm losing the war? Well, he's obviously... Shut up, Tobin.
In fact, I'd even go so far as to say the English voice acting echoed Kid Icarus Uprising in its earnestness and professionalism. And those of you who know how I feel about Kid Icarus Uprising know that's a compliment of the highest order. Even though my preview time with Fire Emblem Echoes Shadows of Valentia was brief, I'm feeling very good about the game. It may look and feel unmistakably like Fire Emblem, but developer Intelligent Systems has taken great pains not to remove the curious genre-blending elements that made Fire Emblem Gaiden stand out from its peers, whether that's as a black sheep or something more. Nintendo could easily have opted to use this remake as an opportunity to homogenize Fire Emblem Gaiden and slot it into the tried-and-true Fire Emblem formula, but that's not what they've done, and I believe Shadows of Valentia will be a better, more memorable game for it. As always, thanks so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and follow us on social media. You can find all the relevant links in the video description below. Otherwise, keep it on GameXplain for more on Fire Emblem, the 3DS, and all things gaming.